Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 9th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
The conversation about Jesus' suffering and death is enclosed in a dazzling foreshadowing of the resurrection. God affirmed Jesus' identity. The disciples are stunned, speechless, and Jesus resumes his mission with a demonstration of his power over evil. A reading from Luke. Now, about 8 days after these saying, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now, Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory, and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen, listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Just then, a man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." Suddenly, a spirit seized him, and all at once he shrieks. It convulses him until he foamed at the mouth. It mouths him and will scarcely leave him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Jesus answered, "You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, the demon dashed him to the ground in convulsion. But Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astounded at the greatness of God. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You all may be seated. It's a Transfiguration Sunday. Jesus transfigured to the dazzling white and the mountain top, so as my servant. I hate this, Frank, you may like it, so improvising, because and on the way back from the St. Nicholas in a car, the things goes like, uh-oh, that transfiguration happens in here. Here it goes. Because Linda asked me yesterday, it's like, "Did you finish typing before we went to the charity in the World Powers event?" And I said, "Oh yes, I got my draft ready." I was like, "It's good to go. I only need to tweak." That's all I did last night, and I made a print, gave to author, and it's like, oh no, it is not quite. It is. That's when, when the Spirit speaks, believe everything. That's what I want. So let me ask you this, because you know this story of Transfiguration. Heard so many times in your life, because we read every single year. You heard one kind and another kind of the way, so you know the story. You know the story that Jesus and disciples go mountaintop, and Jesus sits there, Moses, Elijah appearing, and all the sun, all the light. Can you imagine me out there? And the crowd covers, and disciples scared. And that story. And they came down. That story. You know, I just summarized. If you're not sure, go home, read the Bible. You always remember. Martin Luther's one of the accomplishments he did was translating Bible into the language of people. So that not just the priest read it, everyone can read the God's word. So if you're not sure about the story or you're more interested, go home and read the story again. So that's kind of the overall what the Transfiguration story is about. So let me ask you this question. Have you ever experienced a story like this in the Transfiguration, seeing this light of Jesus coming out kind of story in your experience? Have you ever had those? I mean, you have a lot of experience. Also, how about you? Have you ever seen the bright light of Jesus coming out? No. You go to mountain a lot. Have you ever seen in the mountaintop something special?
Not on the mountaintop, but one kind of Lutheran staff reunion when there were about 20 of us, and we were worshiping one of our colleagues, fellow counselors' father's church. We all took communion together. It wasn't a bright light, but it was
something
unbelievably warm feeling. It was special.
As I read and think about Transfiguration story, which is, just say it's a weird story. Nobody, the scholars and preachers, trying to explain this for so many years, and nothing really able to figure out what exactly it is. It's a weird story as itself, But like you said, Miho, I start wondering, maybe not this level of brightness as the story talks about, but this kind of light, the light of God comes into our lives. The transfiguration, maybe the tiny scale of transfiguration, I wonder that can happen in our lives, in our experience as well. Like the Neil you mentioned about when you gather in communion, it's not the lighting, and somehow you feel something of going on. So when I read the Transfiguration story, I think of it is like trying to understand the jokes in a theater production, which in a foreign language. I went to the show. If you know more than one language, if you do not know, just take my word of it. If you are being in a place in a foreign language that you're not native language in there, and if somebody says the jokes are extremely countering conditioned. This is exactly countering conditioned. It's not just the word itself and whatever it is. It has more to it. So that if you go to the theater, which is a comedy, and you watch, I didn't get all the things what's funny is about, but at least I could notice it was something funny, cool. Because other people are laughing so hard. Transfiguration story can be like that way. May not understand exactly what it is, but we see this glimpse of God's light shining into, and it's hard to explain whatever it is. And the reason my sermon changed and make also like, where are you, look, is that, so at the end of the service I said in class, Jonathan called me asking, do you know Ruth? Do you know Ruth? The first thing as a preacher think about, you mean in the Bible? That's the first things. And he, come and see. And he showed me, that's a music score with the name on the top, said Ruth Lordholt. There's a lot of Lordholt there. I do not know which one to relate to. So I asked her about it and then figure out that it's the Ernie's mother was a Ruth that I was told. So, okay, good. Because the Jonathan, what he said is, this music, somebody's music in there, I wonder if I can play this music for maybe something to remember Ruth. Maybe special day for her birthday or her day she died, or something to remember Ruth. It was a kind of simple thing, organist preacher discussion about. But when he said it, it just hit me something. It's like lightened something, you know what? It made it something so special for the meaning to somebody in that congregation, and also honoring the organist in the past, connecting the current organist and the organist in the past. And I don't know, this is really hard to explain. But when he was telling these exciting new ideas that we may be able to do, there's a light. It seems like an aha moment kind of thing, but there's a light. And said, that's a good thing. That's a great thing to do that. It makes, Jonathan to show off the little difficult piece you can play, and also to honoring Ruth, and also for the family, and also all the God's people. That is one of those examples to me at the Transfiguration. So Transfiguration is, sometimes we can say, when we see the God's presence, because God comes with a little light. And that can happen in our just day-to-day life. May not know exactly what it is, but we know it. We know in our heart. This is a holy moment. God is present in here. Isn't that Transfiguration is about? Well, at least I would say today, that's what Transfiguration is about. Because story in the Bible, many are strange and weird. But that's not just a story in the past. It's a story also can be our stories as followers of Christ currently. We too have these stories. So today, I totally screwed up my sermon. It's transfigured. I had the quote from the Coach Bill to tell you about today, which I may bring up sometimes, Coach.
Another time will be fine.
Or you can ask Coach about what I was about to say about Coach's post-game speech, which is pretty neat. I saw that might fit in my original thought, which also can tell you too. But as we leave today, I want you to pay attention to that moment of the God's holiness comes in your life, whatever you're doing this week. And just think about, that is like a transfiguration to me. that God's presence in here, weird and very concrete way. And I will remember to tell others. That's a transfiguration.